As dads, some days we feel like we have all the answers, and some days we feel like we don't have a clue. If that describes you, you're at the right place. This is the All Pro Dad Podcast. Hey, I'm your host, Ted Lowe, and each week on the All Pro Dad Podcast, we just ask one question, we explore the answer, we talk about what we've gotten right and what we've gotten wrong, what the experts say, and at the end, we give dads what we call a pro move. And this is something that's simple, but it's very, very powerful. Today, I'm so excited to have Mr. Mark Merrill here, the founder and CEO of Family First, and legendary football coach, Tony Dungy. You guys, thank you so much for being here.
It is awesome to be here. Thank you for inviting us, Ted.
Well, I'm very excited on a personal note because my father-in-law has been a head football coach of high school for 50 plus years and just retired. And I feel now, once I told him I was with you, that I was now in the family. So thank you. It's taken me a while, a couple of decades, but I appreciate the bridge.
Well, that coaching fraternity is a tight-knit group. We love each other, but we let other people in occasionally, so you're okay.
I like that. I do notice that all coaches call each other coach.
I know. And my kids, I have a lot of young kids now, and they are always asking me, Dad, why did that guy call you coach? They don't even know that I ever coached before. So it is nice to have that connection sometimes.
It's really helpful. You don't have to remember names of any of your colleagues.
I know you don't.
Coach, how you doing? That's good stuff. Well, the question today, actually, Tony, when we asked prior to this, what could we talk about? This was what Tony recommended, and that is, how do we allow our kids freedom while still keeping them safe? How do we allow our kids freedom while still keeping them safe? When we asked you what topic you wanted to talk about, why was that your instant go-to?
I just remember growing up, Ted, little small town community in central part of Michigan, and I had a lot of sports friends. And I remember being 15, 16 years old and telling my mom and dad, hey, I'm driving to Ann Arbor. I'm meeting Bob Elliott. We're going to go to the intramural building and play basketball, and I'll be back, tonight. Got all my homework done, and my dad would let me take the car and go to Ann Arbor, 30 miles away, and play basketball, and then come back at 10 o'clock. And it was just a natural thing. And hey, we got 6 or 7 guys. We're going to go play touch football down at the park. We'll be back, before the lights go out. And that's how I grew up. And I can't imagine doing that now with my kids. Yeah, go, just take the car and go, come back by 11 and you'll be fine. But that was special to me. And I still have those childhood friends. We see each other and talk about those days. And it was awesome. And part of it helped me become a young adult and learn responsibility and that type of thing. And I made some mistakes and did some things I wouldn't want to tell my mom and dad about. But that was part of the growing up process. And I think my kids have missed that.
Mark, did you grow up with a lot of freedom, or your dad keeping you close?
Like Tony, a lot of freedom, and it was a different time, but it was a similar time in some sense. But we definitely had the freedom, and we would leave sometimes on weekends in the morning, and we would go out into the woods, and we'd have fun. We'd ride bikes, and Mom had this big bell, and when she rang the bell, that meant dinner time. And so all we had to do would be within ear distance of hearing that bell rang, and we were like dogs running to a kennel. And we came home and we would chow, and then we'd spend some time together as a family.
And what do you think that freedom did for you growing up?
I think, like Tony said, it gives you a sense of responsibility, that you're accountable for your own actions. Also, it taught me that it gave me the freedom to fail. And I failed many times, but I learned each time I failed, and hopefully that made me into the person that I am today.
I like that. So you guys, how old are your kids and your grandkids? And then talk a little bit about how things have shifted, or how you've stayed or you've remained doing that as a dad.
I think I can speak on that because we have a couple of generations and we've learned a lot. Our oldest daughter is about to turn 40 and our youngest daughter is 8. So we've got them between 8 and 40. And our first group, we called them the first wave. We were like all parents, kind of protective and, tightly wrapped. And we learned that, they'll do okay and they grow. So this second group of adopted kids who are now 23, 22, 17, 15, 11, 11. I missed the 12-year-old, 12, 11, and 8. They have gotten a little more freedom. And they're, our older kids say, oh, you never let us do that. And we didn't get to do that. But we've learned that, kids are moldable. They can bounce back from things. You don't have to protect them from every little thing that's going to happen to them. And I think we are better parents now.
Mark, what about you guys?
Yeah, I learned that we have 5 and they're all in the range of 28, 32, 32, and 34. And we actually had a couple of waves as well. We didn't have the tsunami like the Dungys had with all these 11 kids, but we had 3 kids. And then like Tony, we adopted a couple of kids when they were older, 12 and 9, but they're all in that same age range. And so we learned then a lot about parenting. We continued to learn more and more about parenting. And we learned, that when they're younger, that we, those kids, that first wave, as Tony said, we were probably like Tony and Lauren more in the driver's seat. And, but we found as each of our kids got older and with the second wave, as Tony said, we found that, we would ride shotgun with them a little bit more. And then of course, ultimately with all our kids, then we handed them the car keys, so to speak, when they got a little bit older and when they learned the responsibility. It wasn't just based on age. So, we're still learning.
And I will tell you this, the one challenge and where we are a little bit tighter, the social media outbreak is so much different. With our 3 oldest kids, we didn't really worry about that, didn't have to worry about it too much. And now all our kids have tablets. They all want to be on the internet. There's some neat stuff to explore there, but there's some dangerous stuff out there. And we've learned that sometimes the hard way, that you really do have to monitor that much more than physical activity. I mean, I would much rather give my 17-year-old the keys to the car and say, hey, go play basketball and come back in 2 hours, rather than give him a tablet and say, hey, take 2 hours and do whatever you feel like. We've learned that.
Yeah, Tony, that's the hard part. And I think you and I both experienced that we didn't have that in the first wave that much. But then the second wave, it was big time. And really, we found as our kids continue to get older that really addressing the social media issues and challenges there were really some of the harder parts of parenting, because it's not what you see as a parent, it's what you don't see and what's happening behind closed doors, what's happening when our kids are alone on their phones. And we can talk about all the filters and other things that we want, but they're at friends' houses too and other people. And so we just have to really, I think, instill in their heart, in their mind, how they should live and what is the next right decision for them to make.
That's good. So Tony, right now with still having younger kids in the house, how have you guys managed that to say, hey, we've got kids and they've all got phones and they've got tablets. So like, what's some advice?
You do. We've learned that you have to collect them. You have to monitor it. You do try to get the filters. But as Mark said, more than anything, you try to get them to understand what's right and what's wrong and what's acceptable and what isn't. And we have that challenge of having an 8-year-old and a 17-year-old in the house. And well, Justin gets to do this. And how does Justin get his phone for an hour and I only get mine for 20 minutes? And you have to kind of fight through that.
And that's where we talked as our kids were getting older. We talked about that trust, because it's really a trust issue, that trust is earned. It's not just something you're given because you get older. And if a child has been entrusted with something, they've done it well, they've done it right, then they have more opportunity to do more things, is the way we looked at it.
That's good. It sounds like there's kind of two sides of this thing. There's the issue of physical safety, And then there's the emotional, relational
Absolutely.
safety. And I'm like you, I would rather go, hey, if you fall down, skin your knee, take a bicycle, go across town. That seems way less scary than what they're going to experience online. I feel like as our kids, especially when they were younger, I'd like to back up to the physical piece of this. Feels like there were kind of two kind of dads. There was the dad that was sitting there going, don't stop, be careful. And then there's the dad that's like, forgot has children. So how do I want to start kind of go through stages just a little bit. How did you guys manage that stage of, because I just remember my son, he's probably 4 or 5 when this big tree that had lower limbs. And I go out there and he's way high up in the tree. And I thought, can I tell a boy not to climb a tree? I don't think I can do it. Now I look at that same tree going, oh man, you were crazy to do that. And so how do you guys balance that? Because I'm sure we have a lot of dads that have little guys. And so how do we manage that?
My first professional football coach was a guy named Chuck Noll, and I went to work for him. And when I went on his staff, he told me that the one thing I was going to have to do to be a good coach is to get to know my players. And you have 53 different players that are all different, that all need different type of coaching. And I think that's so true with parenting as well. Mm-hmm. Every one of your kids is different. And I can remember my sister vehemently protesting to my dad, Tony gets to do this. You let Tony do this, and you won't let me do this. And then I would say the same thing. Well, Dad, Lyndon gets to do this, and I don't get to do this. But my dad knew each one of us. He knew just how far he could trust us. He knew the things that we needed to stay away from. Some things he knew would never impact me. He wouldn't even worry about. But my siblings, it might, and he'd have to lay down the law in that regard. It's just an individual thing, and you get to know those kids, and you have to protect each one of them individually. You have to give each one of them a little room individually, but you have to know them to be able to do that.
Well, and I'm curious too, Tony, because I feel like kids will do that a lot. Like, you're being partial, and what was your response to them?
Something my dad told me, fair is not always equal. I'm going to be fair to you. I'm going to treat you well, and I'm going to do what I think is best for a dad. And it doesn't mean you'll absolutely get treated exactly the same way. You may not be able to handle being out until midnight at 18 years old, where your sibling could, and I could trust them. And I know you, and this is the best thing for you. So yeah, I know Johnny got to do that, and you're not going to, and that seems unfair. But you have to trust me as a dad. And that, I think that's really important.
I think what Tony said is right, spot on. And I like to think of it, Tony, we'll keep with Chuck Noll and a football analogy, Coach Dungy. And I like to think of it as this word picture where you have the playing field and you have these sidelines of rules on one side, rules, and then consequences on the other. And then the goal, each end zone, you have one goal is truth, the other one is love. And so for each child that's on the field, there are specific rules that they have to abide by. And then there are clear consequences, and they know what to expect when those consequences, when they break the rules, when those consequences come. But there's always that goal for us as parents that we have truth, that our children know that we are who we say we are and we'll do what we say we'll do, that we're consistent in our parenting and our discipline. But then we have that love, that we not only say that we love them and share that love, but we show it. And we also continually, I remember with each of my kids, continually sharing with them, you know what? I'm doing this not for me. I'm doing this because I love you more than anybody. And I have your best interests at heart. And that was really critical. And so what we found for each child is as they got older, that playing field expanded. The rules went out wider. The consequences were wider. And then those goals continued to be their truth and love. And so we finally got to the point as they got to be teens and then older where I would then, instead of being on the field with them, or Susan would be on the field with them, I would actually be in the stands cheering them on as a fan, and they're making their own decisions about what those boundaries are.
I was going to say one big thing that I learned from my dad, and I try to pass on to my kids too, is to get across to them that we are different. Dungies have different rules and may have different rules than the Smiths and the Joneses and the Johnsons. And we've got to abide by those. And just because someone else does something or doesn't do something doesn't impact us. We can say, hey, that's great for you. We don't do that. My dad doesn't allow us to do that. Or my dad says, I have to say please and thank you and say sir and ma'am. It might not be good for you, but that's what I have to do. And that is so hard for kids because they want to fit in. They want to be like everybody else. But one of my players told me a long time ago when I was coaching the Buccaneers, he said, Coach, I like it when you have rules because it's hard for me to tell my friends, I'm not going to do this with you. I'm not going to do that. But it's much easier if I tell them, my coach won't let me do that, or he's going to fine me, or he's going to kick me off the team. So I can't. As much as I might like to, I can't because my coach won't let me. And it's the same thing when you have that type of respect and love, as Mark said, from your kids, and they say, you know, I could do that with you, but my dad won't let me.
Isn't that great when they can play the parent card? And I want to give them permission to play that card.
Absolutely.
And we're the bad guys that if I do that, my dad's going to kill me. Or my mom's going to, you know, this is what's going to happen to me if I do that. And I can't risk it.
And
I'm sorry.
They might say, well, you have a mean dad or your dad doesn't. I know, but that's how he is. And you know, that's how we have to live. But I really, my dad really got that across to us, and not in an arrogant way. The Dungies are different. And the Dungies do these type of things, and the Dungies don't do these type of things. And that's just the way we are. And if people don't like that, that's okay. And I can remember being young, 11, 12, 13, 14, and, you know, being able to say that to my, and people knew that. People would come to our group and, hey, well, I know Tony won't do this, but that's how it is.
Yeah, and I found that we have to make sure, it came to my mind, that I'm setting an example for my kids. And I tried to do that as they're growing up. And when I failed, I would come to them and say, you know what, I blew it. You know, I messed up, and apologize to them and ask them to forgive me. And I didn't do that one time. I did that many, many times. And they respected me for that because they realized Dad's not perfect. I don't have to be perfect. I just have to do my best. I have to honor God. I want to do the right next thing. And I want to make sure, as Coach Dungy's dad always told him, to make things better.
Yeah. And it is so true, that example that you set, and your kids watch you, and what you do, they do. And what you don't do, they don't do, even if it's not spoken. You guys asked me before we went on the podcast, do you want any coffee? Well, I grew up in an automotive town. Everybody, all the adults, smoked cigarettes and drank coffee. My dad and mom didn't. So I've never had a cigarette, never had coffee. And people ask me why. I never saw it, never did. My dad didn't do it, so I didn't think it was something men were supposed to do. And my dad.
That's very convicting. Not the cigarette part, but the coffee part.
I think I've got to continue with my coffee. I got to have the coffee.
Yeah.
You know, but so many of the kids grow up, they don't know what the men are doing, or they see it and it's different. You know, I see this guy with 3 or 4 kids and he's not married. Well, they think that's normal. That's what men do. My dad was married. And so that's what I thought you were supposed to do. You're supposed to grow up, get a job, get married, and have kids in that order. You know, and that's what I saw. And what we see, we emulate. And our kids do the same thing with us, and we have to remember that.
Yeah, and our kids are always watching, even when we don't think they are. And I remember just talking to each of my kids, talking about integrity. And what is integrity? I remember C.S. Lewis one time said that integrity is doing the right thing even when no one else is watching. Yeah. And whether they aren't watching, whether they are watching, always doing the right thing. And I think that's something that we need to really instill in our kids, and we need to do it starting by our example.
Yes. Amen.
That's so good. Thank you, guys. And so I hear you saying, both of you, is like, hey, when we talk to our kids, are being protective or giving them freedom, it's like custom fit to each kid. Don't compare your parenting to your brother and sister, and even other people's parenting in the world. And one of the best ways we protect them is to model what we want them to do. So each week we give dads a pro move, and we want it to be simple, and we want it to be something they can do, but we want it to really matter. If you guys were going to give dads who are wrestling with this whole thing, whether it's physical freedom or it's social, what would be your pro move of the week for them?
I think for me, it would be to set limits, set boundaries in love, and think about when you're making rules and decisions, is this the best thing for my child? And am I doing it in a loving way? If I don't do it, will it be really a loving, good thing?
That's so good.
Mine would be back to the football field analogy, which is similar to what Coach said, and that would be establish clear rules, clear consequences, and so they'll know what to expect. Yeah. And that goal on each side for us as parents is to be truthful, have truth in that, and love, and that our kids know, no matter what they do, even when they fail, even when they mess up, that we love them no matter what. I remember my dad constantly saying that as I was growing up. I'll never forget it. I love you no matter what happens, no matter what you do, no matter how you fail. I love you no matter what. And that's something that I want to make sure I continue to instill in my kids and grandkids.
You guys.
And I think I would add on to one thing Mark said about demonstrating that. I would, as a pro move, make sure I'm demonstrating that same thing. If I want my kids to be responsible, demonstrate that responsibility. Hey, I want you to come home when you say you're going to come home. Do I do that same thing? Hey guys, I'll be home right after work. I'll see you at 5:00. Oh, I just happened to come at 10:00 because I had something else going on. You demonstrate that responsibility that you want them to show.
So good. You guys, so powerful. Thanks to both of you. And thanks for everyone who's listening. We hope today does amazing things for you as a dad, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for listening to the All Pro Dad podcast. All Pro Dad is the fatherhood program of the nonprofit Family First. Along with our motherhood program, iMom, we exist to help you love your family well. Subscribe to our daily email, the All Pro Dad Play of the Day, by going to allprodad.com/subscribe and get daily powerful and practical fatherhood tips in your inbox. The All Pro Dad podcast is hosted by me, Ted Lowe, produced by Bobby Lewis.